I think we're going live. So, hi Tracy.
Hi, Ruben. How are you going?
I'm very good. I just thought I'd start off by saying hello, everybody. Nyatinwa. My name is Rueben Berg. I'm a Gunnismara man, and it's an absolute pleasure to be able to have this Facebook Live event. And as a Gunnismara man, it's of course really important for me to recognise that where I am is not my traditional land down in Framlingham, down in Warrnambool, but I am in fact here on the traditional lands of both the Wurundjeri and the Bunurong peoples. And so, of course, pay my respects to their elders, both past and present, and to all the traditional lands of all the people who might be joining us here today. And I'm really pleased to be joined here by Tracey Evans. Hi, Tracey.
Hi, thank you, Ruben. I too would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land. I'm on Wurundjeri, beautiful Wurundjeri lands here, and I pay my respects to elders past, present and future. And I'm a Gunditjmara woman, very proud. Ruben and I come from the same clan, so it's an absolute pleasure to join Ruben tonight to actually sit here and talk about, the work of the Assembly, what we see is happening, how we are feeling about obviously things as well, but it's really an opportunity for us to, come together and just provide, an informal chance to sort of reach out to us as elected members, and myself, an executive member, director of the Assembly as well. So I'm elected for the Melbourne Metropolitan Region. So, that's an honour as well. Thank you.
Yeah, fantastic. And as you said, Tracey, we're just here to kind of have a bit of a chat. Nothing too formal. We've got a bit of an overview of stuff we want to share about what's been happening with the First People's Assembly of Victoria, and share about our upcoming Assembly Chamber we've got coming on Thursday and Friday. You feeling excited for that?
I'm always excited for the chamber meeting, just the opportunity to hear all the different views, work out the way forward. Lots of robust conversations happen in the chamber as well. So I always look forward to, hearing and, thinking about things that I haven't thought about before. So yeah, it's it's always a great moment, rather exhausting, but it's a great moment to be a part of.
Yeah, fantastic. And we are able to take live questions. So we've got some questions that people have already sent us in, but if people who are watching right now, you can put some questions down the bottom. And I see we've got Auntie Georgina is saying hello to us, and Nagara Murray also saying hello. So hello to them.
Hi.
And, if you want to share this as well with other people who you think might be interested in seeing what we're up to, that would be also appreciated. So Tracey, there you gave us a bit of an insight over to your role within the Assembly. Do you want to just talk briefly about, yourself and why you got involved in the first place, maybe?
Yeah, so I suppose for me, to begin with, I wasn't actually sure if I was going to put a candidacy forward for the Assembly. I'd thought about it and rethought about it. And then, it was really something that I felt that I needed to consider doing that. I've been a strong supporter and advocate for my people working in areas that, are rather tough. I've worked in the criminal justice sector. I've worked in child protection. My mother's a stolen gen as well. So that's something that's been always passionate. And from a very young age, I had really wanted to, fight for the rights of my people. So I suppose it was that burning desire, fire in my belly that, made really sort of put the stamp on it for me to make sure that I wanted to be a part of this. And I just really felt I had something to contribute, from a grassroots side of things. I grew up in Collingwood, very poorly as well in the Housing Commission, so I'd seen a lot of what's happened to a lot of community has also affected my family, and I just felt that I needed to be a part of this, and not be afraid to speak up as well. That was something that's always been instilled in me from my mother to, not be afraid to speak up. And, if you're going to fight, make sure you fight hard. So there were a lot of my values that was given to me by my elders and, my mother that really helped me to make the decision to be a part of it. And, it's hard work. There's no doubt about it. This is really hard work. It's not easy for us, even as elected members. We're community members. We're mindful that we represent the community, that, it's important for us to hear the voices of our community as well. So those are things that we, for me personally, and I know for yourself, Rueben, as well, you carry that with you all the time when you make decisions. We're only elected people because our people have put us here.
Yeah, no, it's good to hear your story there about why you've come on board. And I think from the time I've been able to have the pleasure of being involved on the assembly with you, I think you're definitely demonstrating those values in the work you're doing too, Tracey.
And what about you, Rueben? Why are you here for?
Why am I here for? So I've been very lucky to be involved with government in a variety of different ways over the years, and I can see the value that having a treaty with the government can have. That there are lots of good things the government's doing at the moment for our communities, but there's lots of ways we could do it better. And I think treaties are a fantastic way to be able to leverage that. And so that's why I saw this as a great opportunity to bring my experience and understanding of government to the work of the treaty to try and make sure that the work we do sets up the future for all of us, for all our generations to come, to be able to get the most for themselves and to ensure that our amazing culture does thrive and continue off into the future. So that's what got me involved.
Yeah.
And it has been a bit of a journey. So we started back in December with our first chamber meeting in Parliament House, which was a pretty amazing experience. How did you feel that went for you?
Yeah, it was an amazing look. Did I ever think in my lifetime that we would be doing what we were doing? I know when, for years I'd always looked to other countries that had treaties and said, I wish we had that. I wish we had something like that. And did I ever think that, I would be a part of it? No, not in this lifetime. And I think it was it was a really emotional time for a lot of people, it was important for us to also look after ourselves sort of spiritually in the space as well. And, just to draw upon each other's strength during that time. And it was probably, it was definitely a highlight of, my life really, and just where it's got me to. But, it almost seems like it was years ago now. Rueben.
I know, it feels like, I think that it was December last year and so much has changed in that time. It was a bit of a whirlwind, but it was pretty powerful having the 31 of us are there as elected representatives. As you said, we are elected representatives. So the First People's Assembly is made up of, there are some reserved seat holders from the various traditional owner groups across the state, and each registered Aboriginal party has the opportunity to nominate a representative to be on the assembly. And then there are, how many of us? There's 21 of us who are elected, I think, then on top of that, from the different regions. And so the two of us, we're from the metro region, 9 of the metro region representatives, and then there's the other regions with 3 representatives each. So it is a really powerful thing to have been elected into.
And good cross section, females, males, some elders, youth. We value the voices of our youth as well. The diversity, I think that's what's so important as well. We all, one collected as traditional owners and Aboriginal Victorians or Aboriginal people, but there's so much diversity that just exists amongst the group, and that's the one thing that so there should be, because if we had all of us just agreeing on things all the time and everything was all happy, we're not dealing with happy moments here. We're dealing with change, change for the future, and none of that's going to come easy. None of it's going to be easy as we walk forward and have big dreams, big hopes, and we we want what's right for our people at the end of that, and that's, we will, our role is to make sure that we get what our community and our people need.
Yeah, and to set the foundation so that we can get these outcomes coming in the future. Yeah.
Yes.
And so we had that big meeting in December, which was really just kind of a coming together and at the start of the process. And then we had another meeting in February, which again seems like a world away, where that was more of a, I guess it was more of a consolidation of a chance to get together outside of that environment of being in Parliament, where it was more of a casual kind of chance to make sure we got to know everybody properly, because we didn't know everybody who was on there. So that was a really good chance to just learn and hear from others. And we got to hear from some experts from the state and around the country and around the world actually came and spoke to us at that February chamber. I thought that was really quite powerful and useful to get that international perspective on the work that we're involved with here.
Yeah, no, that was I enjoyed that meeting. That was at the Aborigines Advancement League, and so it was the meeting that really set the scene for us going forward, and really got to hear about some of the passions of some of the members. Jason Kelly, so he's a Mutti man from the one of the regional areas. So he spoke about the truth and justice in that space, and since then that's been a resolution. So but he spoke just about the passion in that area, and then the work had been done, and the passing of a resolution, and then the whole chamber voting on that. So that just was something that was passionate for him. Other people's had an interest in it. Other people started to learn about what that actually meant, what could be possible, and then of course it came to play in the June chamber meeting, where the resolution was passed, with really high votes to actually get over as well.
Yeah, and I think that's a really important point you raised there, that we did have our June chamber meeting, and all the decisions around treaty-related business have to be made by our chamber. We do have a board that got elected, which you're a part of, and then we do have the office. We've got a CEO who does the work to manage kind of the administration of the office, but all decisions about the treaty process, about the Elders' Voice, which we'll touch on soon, about the Self-Determination Fund, the Treaty Authority, all those decisions have to be made by the Assembly, by the 31 of us who've been appointed to those positions. And I think that's really, it's quite a powerful thing to remind everybody and make sure they're aware of, that it is us 31 who do make those decisions at that chamber.
Yeah, it's absolutely important, to be reminded of that, and that it's not my one decision that actually makes something, the work being done when it comes to the resolutions. It's the collective voice. It's all of us agreeing that this is important enough for us to all vote on, so that we can make it become reality for the path that we're on.
Yeah. So I thought I might talk through some of the other things we decided at that June chamber.
Yep.
And all these things are up on the website for the First People's Assembly of Victoria as well, just to remind people. So if you go to the website, which I'm just going to find there now to remind everybody of, which is at firstpeoplesvic.org, and you can find there within the news section all the communiques that have gone out from our different chamber meetings and from the board meetings as well. There's communiques out there, and so you can go through and see the detail of what it was decided at those assembly chambers, and I encourage people to do that. But on top of the decision around supporting so in terms of the Truth Commission and Transitional Justice, it was around seeking from government commitment around developing a terms of reference for that, and that's what we agreed to in June. The other resolution, which was brought by Alistair Thorpe, was around methods for the chamber, for the Assembly, to add additional traditional owner groups as reserve members. So as I said before, we've got the elected groups from the different regions, and then the appointed groups from within the traditional owner groups. And not all the state is represented through that. It's not every group that has registered Aboriginal party status, so not everyone's included in that reserve seat. And there was a resolution made to progress the idea of looking into how we can actually come up with ways of doing that. I think that's going to be really hard for us to do. I think that's an easy process, but I definitely supported the idea of looking into it further, because if we can find ways to do it, I think that's really great. We do have a decision to make about the progress of that at this next upcoming chamber, just to look at the progress so far. There's not a decision we're making at this next chamber, but it's a really complex one though, about how do we ensure that this group that's supposed to be representative of traditional owners of Victoria really is representative when it's not clear exactly who can represent who and where their boundaries are. Do you have any thoughts on it that you're happy to share, Tracey?
Just my only thoughts are I voted in favour of it. I believe that the work that we're doing on the Assembly is making sure that those groups who don't have a seat on the Assembly are recognised and are able to have a seat. So I voted in favour of it. It wasn't something that I had to think about. I just, I think that when you're, when you're doing work and when you're thinking about your people, it's really thinking about everybody. And I agree. It's a complex. It's complex because it's currently what exists. We know as Aboriginal people, we don't actually sometimes sit into the Western way of how the recognition of to obtain RAP status is actually recognised and whatever else. So but if we, if as an Assembly we our biggest decision is to do something different, well then be it. If we're going to make sure that there's no one that's left behind on this, and I think it's an exciting space. I think that there might have been a time where where the Assembly or just the community might never have thought that this was possible for us to even consider. So I'm quite proud to see that we've actually been able to have something come to the chamber and members vote on it, so that it's actually in sight of what it is that we're trying to do. So, to date, they were two things that I was in full support of, and I think, and I look to see what that looks like as we progress forward. It'll be an interest area for just about all of us as Assembly members, I believe.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely support the idea. I think it's going to be challenging that,
Yep.
Right, for better or worse, we have the Victorian Aboriginal Heritage Council, who one of their main jobs is to try and help determine where these boundaries are. And obviously I've got a conflict that my dad was on it from the start. He's no longer on it, but I've had involvement with it. And I think if we're going to try and replicate the work that they're already trying to do when that's their only job and they haven't been able to do it, to think that we can just find some magic way to solve it, I think is going to be a struggle. But there are some differences between what they're trying to do and what we're trying to achieve. So I'm open to it, but I wouldn't want to make it too complex that we're duplicating the efforts of another group already trying to do that same stuff.
Yeah, no, I agree. And of course, I'd be interested in knowing from those groups what it is they think we should be doing in this space, because, it's their groups, it's their people that are affected, and what could come out of this. So I think, and we've heard from those groups, we've heard what it is that they're saying, and, that's important for us to recognise that, we have heard the voices of those groups who don't have the seat, so that's the thing that I would say to the community, that if you don't have the seat, at the moment, that we have actually heard what it is you're saying, and I think that's really important for us to say here tonight as well, Rueben.
Yeah, and the other part too, I think, is important to reinforce that having a representative from a traditional owner group is not the only way to have your voice heard at the Assembly as well. And we've got the elected representatives from across the region representing the whole state through those regions. And by talking to your regional representatives, that's another way you can get your voice heard as well.
Yeah, that's true. I'm trying to see sorry, Rueben, I'm trying to see where the chat bar is for
you have to, if you want to see the questions from the community, which there's some up already, you'd have to jump on Facebook yourself.
Oh, of course you do.
Yeah.
I can't multitask like that, but
That's all
anyway.
right. We've got some questions that have started coming through there, and
Thank you.
I'll move to those as we get through, but I just wanted to make sure we covered off what we talked about in the June chamber and then just prep people for what's happening next. And then we'll get to some of these great questions we've got in the chat there. One of the other decisions we made was supporting the kind of the overall approach to the dispute resolution idea, and tied up with that with the principles around the treaty authority. And that's obviously a really critical bit of work that Nagara Murray's been leading as the chair of that group, around how do we make sure that we can hold government accountable and that we're all held accountable to the process we're putting in place, so that if there is a dispute between what the state thinks and what we think, that we've got an independent umpire to kind of help us out. And that's the role of the dispute resolution and the treaty authority. And the reason there's two is that we need to have the dispute resolution in place so that if we have a dispute about the treaty authority, we can go somewhere, because until we actually have the authority, we wouldn't have an umpire. So it's the kind of holding pattern umpire until we have the actual authority.
But when might we have a dispute? When might we be in place for that, Rueben?
So at our coming chamber, we are agreeing to kind of the negotiating package that will be used to negotiate that interim dispute resolution process. And so hopefully, if we endorse that at our chamber meeting coming up on Thursday and Friday, that can then be used to sit down with the state and negotiate and actually get that dispute resolution process in place, which is pretty exciting. The other, I think, really significant conversation we had at the last chamber was around this idea of whether or not the treaties that this treaty framework is going to kind of spell out should be just a statewide treaty, should it be multiple localized treaties, or should it be a combination of both? And the Assembly chamber came to the resolution that it should be a combination of both. So there will be an overarching state treaty is what we're putting forward, and then the localized treaties as well. So I think that was a really powerful outcome from that last chamber.
Yeah, I think so as well, because I think we'd probably thought about that, we'd thought about it for a good 6 months or longer, and some who have been, watching the space of treaty for some time and sort of following it and whatever else, it's probably a question that that the community of and those people have actually thought about for longer.
Importantly, though, along with all these decisions that we're making as the Assembly chamber, is those are kind of the negotiating positions. This is a negotiation between the state and ourselves. So that's the position that we've kind of agreed to. And then it will be a case of going through the process of seeing what the state's position is. And hopefully they agree, and we can give a good case why they should use that same approach. But it is just one of that's our position as the Assembly that we need to negotiate with the state. So that was what we agreed to the last chamber. We've got our next chamber coming up, as I said, on Thursday and Friday, and people can follow the start of that chamber. That will be streamed live, the first part of the chamber, which is always an exciting thing to be able to do. But we did make the decision as Assembly that some parts of it would just be private, would just be for us, so that we can have open and frank conversations, and also being mindful that any public conversation is also a conversation that the government can sit in on. And there are some things we want to be able to discuss and get agreement ourselves without having to worry about the government, looking in and having a perspective on it too. So really excited to have lots of people join in and watch on Thursday.
Yep.
Yeah. So coming specifically then to what we're covering on Thursday, I've actually put up a motion to discuss on Thursday. That's one of the things we can do through the assemblies. Assembly representatives can suggest items of discussion. And I've flagged an issue to discuss around Australia Day, around the 26th of January. And it is the conversation we have every year around the 26th of January and whether or not that is or is not an appropriate day to celebrate. And I think for most Aboriginal people, there's a sense it's not a day to celebrate. It is a day of mourning and a day of survival and invasion. And my resolution is not so much to agree or disagree on that. It's whether or not the First Peoples Assembly of Victoria should have a position on it, should be advocating around it, or should not, whether it's something within our scope or it's not within our scope. And so I'm really interested to hear what people's thoughts are around that and see where the conversation goes there.
Yeah, it was a really good, when I saw that come through, Ruben, I thought that you had thought ahead of what can we think about. I tend to not think too far ahead, but it was really good because I thought, well, why not have that conversation now? So, obviously, thank you for putting that on there so that we can have a discussion rather than leave it till the November chamber meeting, and we can have a discussion now and sort of get a feel what are people thinking, because I have no doubt that again in January next year will be it'll bring up a lot of things for community, as it always does. I mean, what's happening at the moment around the free of the flag has obviously brought up a lot of dialogue, conversations as well. So, it is about having timely discussions so that, we can get our house in order and sort of know, what our position is and what we're thinking and how we're feeling. So I think, as an elected Aboriginal representative body, it's better to do that sooner rather than later, and sort of, have that conversation amongst us as chamber members and sort of get a feel for what we're thinking on the subject.
Yeah, exactly. It wasn't a conversation I think we could have just started in November. I think that would have been too late to start that conversation. So that's why I was just trying to get that ball rolling then. We will be progressing a conversation around the elders' voice. And this is, of course, Tracey, it's great having you here because you're the chair of the committee around that. So do you want to just share a little bit about what's happening with the elders' voice and what we'll be talking about on Thursday or Friday?
Yeah, so the Elders Voice. So obviously, we had the Elders Voice live stream a couple of weeks ago now, and I hope that actually provided a lot of information about where the work has been happening and what's been happening to date. But so just to note that we had received, obviously, PwC's Elders Voice report, and had taken a look at that and sort of worked out. So there was a subcommittee that was formed, and I put my hand up to chair that committee because I felt that that's an area where I really, felt I was passionate about and wanted to sort of be a bit of a driving force behind that. And so we had formed a subcommittee for the other assembly members who joined it, put their hand up. And it's a mix of some are the registered Aboriginal Party reps, and some are the, just the elected community reps as well. And so we had a number of discussions, and sometimes, we had half an hour discussions on just the one topic around the definition of an elder, and which was very much a discussion. And sometimes we had meetings where we actually didn't really have a firm opinion thereafter on it. And so we then decided to have a couple of workshops just to sort of unpack some of the, and what would an elders draft model look like? Where would we get the elders from? The definition of elders. It was agreed that clans and the community would define elders. That was important. So we tried to just capture some of the things that we knew should be in the elders' voice, but it's probably fair to say that a lot of what's in the draft elders voice model is still very draft. It requires the community engagement. It requires the community to tell us, we like this, we don't like that. Even down to sort of, so one of the things that had come out of it was that it was important for us to recognise the existing elders groups that are out in the community, and we also recognise that there are elders groups, the ones that might meet at the local bowls club, that provide a voice, and that are also just as strong a voice as a registered Aboriginal Party elders voice as well. So we had decided that was important to recognise that, and the nominations from those groups to be on the elders voice would be important. We discussed an expression of interest process for those who wanted to self-nominate up, and you know, the representation from regional as well. It's important to have regional and metro, male and female. So we did come up with what's sort of a loose draft elders voice, and so that will actually go to the chamber this week for us to for the chamber to obviously take a look at, and that for us is sort of a guiding document to actually then engage the community in and start to have sort of the discussions and the conversation around something.
Yeah, so it's in no way the
No.
final idea. It's just a starting point.
Yes.
That you're getting endorsement from the assembly that this is a good starting point.
Yeah.
To then go and use that to then
Yes.
continue those conversations.
Yeah, and then that will be, you know, that the elected members will be able to take that document out and share it. It will be, you know, promoted, obviously, that it's there. Please take a look at it. We would want community and just individual community members to actually start, you know, submitting their feedback and saying, you know, what they don't like about it. You know, even just, even if it was just an elder that really had its, you know, had something that they wanted to say about it. You know, phone calls. I mean, I'm always, you know, open to having conversations with elders. After hours, I do a lot of that, you know, sort of after hours conversations and really get to hear, you know, what it is that they're feeling strong on and why they're feeling strong on it. I think that's really, really important. So, you know, there will be, so then, you know, we have to consider the limitations of engagement at the moment through the pandemic. You know, I mean, we have to be creative. We have to think about what does that look like? How do we, you know, because the intent and the timelines is that by the November, what we've sort of, you know, principally agreed is that by the November that we would have a final draft elders model, and then the elders voice would form early next year. You know, so I think what's important, like, and what I've focused on is the importance of this community engagement. Like, we absolutely have to be able to do what that looks like and try and do it in a respectful way, that we don't sell ourselves short in this. I think is important to do, and that's the hard part, because when you're not able to meet with your people, you feel like you know, you're falling short on what it is that you're trying to do, and that's the most frustrating bit that I think us as Aboriginal people are feeling. Just even in, you know, my day-to-day job, I feel the frustrations of not being able to engage with community like I would like to.
Yeah, it is a real challenge, and I know for myself, and this is part of what today's about, is to find different ways that we can reach out. But knowing that not everybody's online, not everybody's on Facebook, and I know next time I run one of these, I'm going to try and have it streamed on YouTube as well. So it's not just about Facebook, but I've set up a newsletter now, an e-newsletter. I've got a YouTube channel. There's lots of different ways I'm trying to reach out, and I think we all need to kind of have as much imaginative ways we can think of to reach out. I did do a survey. And I asked lots of people to give their thoughts around. And one of the questions was, you know, in this time of difficulty in engaging with communities, what do you think we should do? And I had a few people were suggesting that we shouldn't do anything at all, that because it's this COVID environment, we should just stop. But the majority of people gave a response saying that we should be doing something. And there was a balance of people saying that that we should make some decisions, but only if there was a really clear mandate on it. So if it was really kind of contentious decisions, maybe we should hold off on that. But if it was stuff that, you know, seemed fairly obvious to all of us that that's no matter, you know, that's the way we should go, then that would be okay. A fair few people thought we should just keep going. You know, we have to get this done, and so just keep doing the work you have to do. And some were suggesting that if we are going to continue to make decisions, we need to kind of still change the way we're doing things to keep innovating how we engage. So I think, to me, there was a good sense that people do want us to progress. And I think it really is important we do progress, but we just have to continue to think about how we can do that to get as many people involved. And it does depend on the type of decisions we're making.
Yeah, actually, it's a good point that you're saying that, because I think it does depend on the decisions. And, you know, for me, if I'm going to make a decision, I need to make sure that For me, I need to be absolutely certain that community engagement has occurred, or so I think I think that's important. I think that's important to make sure, for me, because it goes back to we're elected members of we're elected from the community, and I think that one of the things that I know that if there's progression of other mandated elements of what it is we're doing from the assembly, and if we were to say, well, we won't progress the elders' voice, my worry and my biggest concern is that we won't have an elders' voice. Everything else will progress, and then
and it can't. That's the whole point of the elders' voice, is to help give us guidance for
I
the
know,
decisions we need to make going forward. So
and that's why I've just sort of really tried to sort of really just like in keeping with the timelines and what it is that we're trying to do, because but I think from an assembly point of view, we're always looking at the challenge of us in the space of the pandemic and what it means for the community, and we're evolving, and we're often thinking about how do we do this differently, or how should we do this, and what's that limitation on us look like, and how can we ease that limitation, and so it is something that we're constantly revisiting and looking at. I have no doubt at the chamber meeting there'll be some discussions around that as well, because we're all living through this pandemic, and what it looks like, and and not being able to hold elders forums, and and sort of bring elders together, like we used to be able to, is probably one of the things that we're finding the most frustrating, I think.
Yeah. And I think as well, on top of that, I think all of us kind of accept the reality that even before COVID, in terms of the election process, we didn't have the full support of the Aboriginal community. Not everyone came out to vote.
That's correct.
And I think that's a reality we all accept and understand as the Assembly. And hopefully through the work we've done since the Assembly's been formed, that's made more people aware of what we're doing, and maybe given more comfort that it is something they should be supportive of and should get on board. But I really encourage anyone who's listening today or involved in the process to encourage others to be involved in the process too, because if you're not involved, then your voice won't be heard, and we want your voice to be heard as well. So I just encourage anyone out there who is listening and being part of any engagement to share with others and think about how you can make sure you're a part of it, rather than just being on the sideline, because we want you a part of it as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And we want, even if even if what you want to tell us is, you want to tell us we're stuffing up or whatever. I think that's important. That's important to hear from our critics. I've always said, tell me, what you don't like or what we're not doing. I will never shy away from that, because I think that's the measuring stick. That's you're trying to get the right balance of,
and that doesn't mean we can fix whatever your problem might be.
Yeah.
Because it's likely, I would hope to think we've already thought about some of those problems, but this is a really difficult space, and we're never going to be able to please everybody, but we want to make sure that we hear from everybody's voice to make sure we're taking everything into account we can when we're making these decisions. So definitely encourage people to make sure they enroll to vote for the next elections we've got, which will be in a couple of years. Still got a bit of work done before then, though.
Yes.
I just really trying to finish off what we are talking about next week, and then we will get to some of these amazing questions we've got. We are going to be progressing conversation around the framework. So as I mentioned at the last chamber, we agreed that it would be a hybrid model, both the statewide and the local. And now we need to get more into some of the details around the framework. So in terms of what we're talking about at the chamber, it's just kind of an update of the direction we're going, to get confirmation from the chamber they're happy with the direction we're going as that committee. And as you said, you're part of the Elders Voice Committee, but there's another handful of different committees focusing on specific tasks, still all made up of Assembly chamber members. And again, not with decision-making powers beyond that. They can just recommend things to the entire chamber. That's where the decisions get made.
And I think that's important to, like, for me, some of the other committees I don't sit on, but I know that as an elected person, that any decisions and the decision that I make, is I get the opportunity to be a part of that, and to take a look, and then have, ask the questions, and say, yes, I like that or whatever. So do you know what I mean? There's
Yeah.
almost like that for me, even though I don't sit on, but I sit on the executive board, so I see the updates of all the other committees.
Yeah.
But as an elected community member, I then get the opportunity to say, well, I disagree with this, or I agree with that.
Yeah.
And sometimes, you know, some of that is already done at the board level, because, you know, at the board level, I might say, you know, I think, you know, I have a position on this, or, you know, the other board members might have a similar position or whatever else. So, you know, wherever possible, you know, it goes to the chamber. Do you know what I mean? Like the chamber make the decision. That's the
Exactly
power.
right.
And, you know, that's the power. That's where the true power actually exists. That's where, you know, that's the bit that I enjoy the most, actually.
Yeah. So in terms of the framework, what's happening at the moment is we're trying to work out some of the key questions around what is on the table and what's not on the table. And I think so far, at least from my perspective and others I've heard, the general view is that everything should be on the table. Anything the state government has the authority to make a decision about should be something that can be negotiated in treaty.
Yeah. So Rueben, when you say the state government can make a decision about, tell us some of those things.
Sure. So I guess it's important to realise that there's the Commonwealth government has their authority and the states have a different level of authority. So things that's under the state control are things around land and water management, which is something that I'm particularly interested in through my role with water. Aspects of the justice system is definitely under the control of the states. We're looking at things around houses, seats in Parliament. That's something the state has control over. Aspects of education, the states have control over those things. Certain parts of taxation, the state has control over that. And so it's all those different aspects that we need to make sure is on the table, so that when groups actually go to negotiate treaty, which is not us as this version of the First People's Assembly of Victoria, we're not the ones who are going to negotiate actual treaty outcomes, but we're setting up the framework that will be used to negotiate that. And that's why we need to make sure that everything is on the table from my perspective. And to give enough, we need to give guidance, but flexibility, I think, so that we can ensure that the groups at the local level and at the state level coming to actually sit at the table don't have their hands already tied when they get there, but they do need to know if certain things are already off the table. And that's where we'll have to hear from the state about that.
Yes, and we haven't up till now we haven't heard on what's off the table from government. So that's
right, and it was only just was
it
last month that we had the actual some of the executive had their first meeting with the minister in terms of starting that negotiating process.
Yeah, just to formally sort of say, you know, we're ready to start some conversations thereafter, but you know, but by no means was it a negotiation meeting as such. No.
But it was the start of the process. And
correct.
I guess just to clarify for people, that no decisions have been made around any of those things yet. It's just we're starting that process.
And it's important to note that only people who those decisions are actually about can make the decisions and negotiate. That's a really important thing, because for me, I wouldn't want to negotiate on behalf of, you know, another, you know, like I'm with the Eastern Maar traditional owner group. I'm not in a position to negotiate on another traditional owner group's, you know, position or their, you know, or thereafter. I think that's important to note. I think when you're a traditional owner or you know your clan, you know your place.
And that the Minister for Aboriginal Affairs, Gabrielle Williams, she will be coming along to our Assembly Chamber to talk to us on Friday, which would be good to have her there to have a conversation with. I'm going to quickly try and just summarise what else we're talking about so we can get to some of these questions, but I just want to make sure people know what it is we're talking about. We're also going to be talking about the interim dispute resolution process, so finalising our position on that so that it can go for negotiation. Looking at the terms of reference for the truth-telling process. Well, we're more looking at the process for how that's going to be developed. And so, as we heard earlier, that was a decision that was made, and it's still in the discussion about what that actually will look like. So no decision has been made yet about what that looks like. And I know that was some of the questions in the chat around what that actually is going to look like. And I guess the answer is we're not sure at the moment. We're going to be working through that with this terms of reference that's going to be led through the Assembly and the committee's work. Also, there's going to be an update around the additional pathways for recognition. So we will get an update on how that work is going, but I don't believe we're making any firm decision about that at this stage. So those are the things we will be discussing. You can find a copy of the agenda for Thursday and Friday on the First Peoples Assembly website at firstpeoplesvic.org. And so you can see the outline of what we will be discussing. And as you heard before, you can join in and watch live at the first morning of the couple of days there. So encourage people to get on board there and have a look at that. Was there anything else you wanted to touch on, Tracey, before we move to some of the questions we've got?
No, go fly into the questions, Rueben. Try and answer as many as we can.
Go through these and have a look. And if there's some stuff I feel like we've already covered, I might jump over those, but we'll try and get the best answers we can there for people. There was a question here around, and you touched on earlier, around the Free the Flag movement, and that there's been some kind of progress based on the amount of attention that got, and that there's generally progress is steaming along in lots of different areas with the changes in closing the gap. There's a lot of progress that's being made at the moment. Is that your sense of where we're at the moment?
I think it's, I think there's progress. It's back in the spotlight. That's a good thing because it never actually really went away. We still don't have the rights to the Aboriginal flag. There's a lot of mixed community feeling around, is it still our flag and whatever else. So it may actually be something that, us as an assembly might talk about as well briefly. But, it's, yeah, so I think it's, it's important to recognise that is, current, a current thing that's before our eyes, I suppose.
Yeah, I think that the level of discourse, though, at the moment is quite positive about supporting self-determination, there's a lot of support I find in the non-Aboriginal community for Aboriginal people and our rights. And I think that is quite powerful and shown through this treaty process. So hopefully that can enable us we can continue that support with the non-Aboriginal community to get that there.
Yeah, that's important to recognise.
There's a question down here around, does treaty have a position on homelessness and housing? So I guess from my perspective, there's no set position on it as yet. It would be something that, as we said before, that's something that the state has a controlling interest in. And so that should be something that's on the table as part of those negotiations. As us as the First Peoples Assembly, we're not coming up with what the position should be. We're just saying that should be something that's part of the discussion. It's on the table. And so I would hope that there would be outcomes around homelessness and housing for our communities that comes from treaty.
Yeah, me too, Rueben. I would think that given the state's mandate in that area, I would like to think that would actually be looked at.
And I think they've already shown some interest in that space of working with Aboriginal Housing Victoria. I think they've handed over a large amount of their stock to Aboriginal Housing Victoria to manage. So a lot of this, I think that's what's really interesting about the treaty process, is that there's a lot of little things going on, I think, quite progressively. And I think treaty is an opportunity to bring it all together as a package and say, this is the sort of stuff we must continue to do, and to make it not just on the whims of the government at the time, but embed it within the Constitution, embed it within legislation, and embed it in a treaty agreement, so it will be enduring and not just at the whim of the politicians at the time.
Yeah, that's right. I think that's an important thing it's important vision to actually hold close and sort of, not based on when there's funding and then there's a snatch and grab from community to try and get the funding and,
which is so often what we've had to do as a community, to not know what's coming next, whether or not you are going to be able to keep doing the great work that communities out there are doing. Treaty will hopefully be a way of giving them security to know that there is going to be support for the work they're trying to do to benefit our communities.
Yeah, that's true. So true.
There's another question here around the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples and how that's considered within the process. And I know that's a document specifically referenced in the legislation that establishes the treaty process. So that's definitely there. And I think that will be something that we draw on as part of the treaty negotiating framework to make sure that's one of the documents that underpins that process.
Yep. That's right. And also too, is there opportunity to look at it, when not that we're planning on going into any type of disputes with government, but, what is, does any of that come into play, and where can we draw upon any of that to actually, build our strength and our position on, what we're feeling about certain, certain things that we're in dispute over, I suppose.
Yeah, to have that solid foundation of a document to refer to, I think is powerful to have.
Correct. Yeah.
Another question here around if there are any roles that non-Indigenous people can play to support the First Peoples Assembly of Victoria. What are your thoughts there, Tracey?
Absolutely, we need our allies. I think, throughout, I think throughout the work that we've done to date, and the support of when we were inaugurated, the support came from the wider community as well around what we were doing with the Assembly and advancing the treaty. So, yeah, we definitely need allies. We're often asking people to, join us on our journey as well. I think the allyship will actually, will come sailing past pretty quick at some stage, and, people will want to get onto it. Maybe not just yet, Ruben, but that is my feeling that, we need our non-Aboriginal community members and non-Aboriginal organisations. We want them to be part of this as well.
That's right. And the government needs to know that it's got the support of the broader community. Otherwise, they're not necessarily going to commit to it.
Yep.
And so we need to make sure it is seen out there in the community that all Victorians support a treaty process. So it does have that strong basis to be able to move forward.
Yeah.
There's another question here for you specifically around the elders' voice.
Yep.
And whether or not, first off, whether or not you receive the information from BGLC, their voice feedback they put forward, and also whether or not the documentation around for elders will be reader friendly, so that we can make sure it's communicated clearly.
Yeah, so yes, I have received from BGLC. So thank you very much for putting pen to paper, because that's really important, because I know it takes time and effort and thought as well.
Yeah, we do really appreciate it when groups or individuals can really, there is an avenue to submit information and submit their thoughts, and we really do welcome that, and so it's great to see that you've been able to receive that.
Yeah, and definitely to note that any type of correspondence also that does come in will start to inform some of the decision making and what it is we're trying to do and where we land on with it. And so I think it's in, and it will absolutely has to be user friendly. I mean, I think it needs to be plain English, really easy to understand. I mean, I think it was the elders voice model, and we heard loud and clear from members that it was such a large document that Pick had brought out, and so we reduced it down even further. And I can let you know that the current draft elders model is even shorter and down even smaller. But yes, user friendly is really, really important, because I personally don't like reading, even though I've been involved in it. I don't like to read, a 100-page document, because I think it loses its flavour. It needs to be all
to the chase. Get us the detail,
and I think it needs to be, it needs to be in our language. It needs to be the way we understand life to be as Aboriginal people, and what we understand and what is important to us and our elders, and capture some of that. But we also recognise that once the elders are in place and we have an elders voice, that the fine tuning of that document and changes and really bringing it to life is then going to take shape. That's the bit that I'm actually looking forward to, that the voice will be heard at that very moment of time where you have an elders voice in place. Yeah.
Another question here around stolen generations and what place they might play in the treaty process. And I think that's a really important question. I've also heard similar questions around people who are not traditional owners from here in Victoria, but who are Aboriginal people living here in Victoria, and what role treaty might play for them. And I think there is absolutely a role that treaty can play for those different groups. And I think it's predominantly, I feel, my sense is it's going to be at that statewide level treaty that will play a key role for all those different groups. That should benefit all Aboriginal Victorians at that statewide treaty level. My thinking at the moment would be that the localised treaties might be more directly with traditional owner groups, and that will enable them to reap the benefits of through that treaty process. But I would think there would also be flow-on benefits for the broader community there as well. But I think at that statewide level is where there can be reforms and commitments made and changes to how we do things that will benefit stolen generation members, that will benefit all Aboriginal Victorians. And so I think that statewide level, there is a place for everybody, for all Aboriginal Victorians and traditional owners in the treaty process.
Yeah, that's important to understand. Although, we are all traditional owners, this is about the future of all Aboriginal people, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people that are in Victoria, that, so it is important that, stop, like the Truth and Justice Stolen Gen, that'll come into play, that'll really come into play, you've got to right the wrongs from the past before you can even think about moving forward. That's the truth in that, so I think, we're still, for me, I've fought very, very hard for the rights of my mother who's a stolen gen, another stolen gen, and, I acknowledge all the other stolen gen members and their families that are out there fighting all the time in this space. And, we, the Stolen Gen redress announcement, that's wonderful. There's still a lot more that needs to be done. The government needs to do a lot more, and that's where I stand as as a descendant of the Stolen Gen. And it's we'll know when there's been enough that's been done from government. Yeah.
It's not yet. There's a way
not
to
yet.
Go. Yeah. There's a question here around outcomes from the chambers being made public, and yes, so you can find all of our communiques from the Assembly chambers at the website firstpeoplesvic.org. So I encourage you to jump on there to find that. There's also sometimes kind of little snapshots, information sheets that the First Peoples Assembly staff put together after each Assembly chamber. And I've been trying to do myself a little video after each chamber to share and what we've come out from. So there is ways to do that. And if you're not getting enough information, then I encourage you to contact either, if you're part of a specific traditional owner group that has a representative, contact them. If you've got an elected representative, well, you will have an elected representative in your region, contact them and try and get the information from them as well.
I'm happy for you to contact me, and I'm sure Rueben is the same. You can contact me personally. All
our details are up on the First Peoples Assembly website. Our emails are there.
If you need particular documents sent out to you, or you don't have access to a printer, please reach into the Assembly or to one of us, and I'm happy to make sure that they be sent out. If you like it in the reading form rather than online. I mean, I prefer to have papers. I don't have a printer at the moment, so I have one, but it doesn't work very well. But we want you to be able to get the information that is there and ask the questions, and don't be afraid to contact us. Really don't be. I know at the very
to be that connection.
Yeah, and at the beginning I used to have lots of contact, and sometimes there's not enough contact that I'd like to see from my people. So the thing is, I would say, if you give me an email or if you give me a phone call, and I know I speak for all the other elected members, that we'll make sure that we'll give you a call back.
Yeah, definitely. We're almost at our time of 6 o'clock, but there's a few more questions. So I think we'll try and get through as many of those as we can.
Yes, please.
Trace,
Thanks.
That's good for you.
Yep. All good.
I've got a question here around whether we think the Black Lives Matters movement is creating momentum for the treaty process here in Victoria. What are your thoughts on that?
I think any type of movement in the black space creates momentum. It's a good thing, isn't it? And
as we said, I think that area of justice is definitely something where treaty can make progress. But I think also really importantly is that we can't just put everything on hold until treaty is going to come along and solve everything. Governments and departments and all agencies need to still be doing things to make improvements when they recognise it, not just saying, oh, well, yeah, we'll fix that when it gets to treaty. We need to still be putting pressure on governments to address all these things that they can do now, even without a treaty being in place. It shouldn't just be a way to delay things.
Yeah, no, that's true. That is so true. We still need to fight and advocate, just the way we have been right up until now. That's important.
And then it's just a question there around service delivery and universal services such as health, how that will be brought into that treaty process. And again, I think that's going to be...
That's a state. Yep.
through that statewide, and but those sorts of outcomes, and I can't stress this enough really, that those sorts of outcomes will come from the actual treaty negotiation itself. What we're working on still just now is the framework for the process for how will it be that we sit down and do a treaty, because this hasn't been done. Like I think sometimes we get caught up, especially as those of us doing this all the time, that you get caught up in this process of it and realize that we have never done this here in Australia. And so we're kind of trying to find the ways that we can do this right. And it should have happened 200 years ago. We should have had this treaty already in place, but we're trying to put it in place now. And so what we're trying to do as the Assembly is work out the process for how this is going to happen to ensure we do get those outcomes. But those are going to be the outcomes negotiated in the next phase of this process. So I hope I've covered all the questions that were there. I didn't necessarily direct everyone's question, but I think we covered most of the comments in what we were talking about.
Unless there was something, there was something that we missed, and they can quickly put it in the chat.
Yeah. And they can contact us anytime as well.
Absolutely.
We're always happy to be able to answer those questions. And really do want to thank everybody who's joined in to watch and be part of this conversation, and really encourage you to share it. Encourage you to share what you've learnt, and to kind of, hopefully you've heard from us that we are trying to do the right thing, and then we've got our hearts on our sleeve trying to do the best we can, and that you can help champion what we're doing as well, and share and get as much information out there as possible, and encourage people to be involved in this process, because we want to hear everybody's voice. And I think that it's challenging in this COVID environment, but we still want to hear from people's voices, and everyone's voices still matters in this process. So really just encourage people to share that out there.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank, obviously, the community that joined us as well, and thank you to Rueben, who has been really instrumental in trying to to get out there to community and do his live feeds and whatever else. So I thank Rueben for giving me this opportunity to come to you as well, and I hope to be able to be a bit more tech savvy, just like Rueben, and be able to do the same thing as well. But we value, obviously, the community's input into, holding us accountable, asking us the difficult questions. That's really, really important. And just the opportunity to obviously join you and just maybe get you thinking about something you haven't thought about, or just, learning something new in the space, or, reaffirming that, that there is progress and some good progress, but recognizing that there's still a lot of work that needs to be done, and that we're making sure that we're hearing the community and what it is that the community is wanting through this as well is important to us.
Definitely. And I've still got my survey open. It's on the Facebook page there at the very front. So we'd love for anybody who's listening who hasn't filled in the survey to fill that in and give us your thoughts, even just after what you've heard today. That would be really powerful to hear your thoughts as well. So thank you very much, Tracey. Thanks everybody out there. And we'll talk to you all soon.
Thank you.